Susie's consciousness slowly returned, and the first sensation was a complete absence of clear thoughts. She turned her head, feeling trapped in a small space. At first, Susie thought she was in a coffin, but quickly noticed that the details didn't match. Then she tried to move, and the lid of the mysterious box gave way. Sitting down, she looked around the room, perfectly clean and hospital-like. "Madam, are you awake?" She heard a voice, and sharply turned her head. Opposite stood a handsome man with slightly longer dark hair and a slight carelessness in his hairstyle. There was genuine curiosity in his brown eyes. "Where I am?" "In the hospital, madam. The patrol unit brought you here." "In hospital?" Susie repeated, feeling that this word did not sound like the usual name of a hospital. "What's the last thing you remember?" "I remember I was walking home from the office and I was attacked." "I felt punches in my back," Susie responded, recalling the pain and fear. "Office? But madam doesn't have to work." The man was surprised. "My name is Susie, and I'm not a madam." Unexpected words and a strange situation. Hospital seemed something ridiculous, and madam passed her attention, as if it were something taken for granted. "You were dressed unusually at the time," he added. "By the way, nice to meet you. I'm Dr. Thomas Light." "I think it's nice to meet you," Susie replied, her mind feeling like chaos. "This is a recovery capsule. It helps heal wounds and normalize the body," Thomas explained. Susie decided to play along with the new reality and check her health. "What city are we in?" "You are in Arrakis, the capital of our world, Novera." After a pause, Thomas asked, "Are you not from our world, madam?" Even without a mirror, Susie felt that something had changed greatly in her appearance. As soon as she looked at her reflection, she was convinced that her body had been transformed, as if after magical processing in Photoshop. Thomas's assistant brought Susie a simple dress worthy of the new world of Novera, and in this ascetic attire, she felt a strange look of respect and curiosity, filled with questions about her past life and future in this new, unknown world. A slightly distracted Susie sat taking in the situation when her assistant, a man named Lucas, offered to do her hair. As she sat down in front of the mirror, she couldn't help but notice how her black locks fell perfectly on her shoulders. Maybe we should cut them up. A thought flashed through Susie's head. However, she soon brushed them aside, realizing that her newfound hair was truly impressive. "Lucas, tell me about the world of Novera. How is it unique?" Susie asked, wanting to know more about the place where she found herself. Lucas, combing her hair strand by strand, began the story. "Novera is a world ruled by the Grand Empress Moli. The capital here is Arrakis, and it is here that the Palace of the Empress is located. Novera is divided into 5 major regions: Teyat, Marek, Seat, Ogma, and Okul. Each has its own managers, but they all swear allegiance to Moli." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. 2 impressive figures entered the room, a man and a woman in formal attire, accompanied by another personal assistant named Thomas. They came on behalf of the Empress to escort Susie to the palace. The woman's silent but respect-inspiring gaze involuntarily evoked a sense of importance among the guests. When Susie and Lucas followed her, she felt a little calmer. The slight anxiety of the unknown began to subside, leaving room for curiosity and a readiness to meet face-to-face with the great Empress of Novera Moli. A fresh breeze from Arrakis greeted Susie as they left the shelter. Standing outside, she looked around to take a look at the new world and, to her surprise, saw no traditional means of transportation, such as horses and carriages. In front of the shining building stood a car that at first seemed like a car to her. Surprise flashed across her face as the Aerofit car gently lifted off the ground and soared into the air, hovering low above the ground. Lucas, catching her gaze, explained that they were flying on an aerofight to the residence of the Empress of Moli. Everything in this world was filled with novelty and seemed like something out of science fiction. The Empress's residence rose on the outskirts of Arrakis and was visible from afar. The futuristic architecture of the building attracted attention with its smooth outlines, as if created for another century. Having landed, the aerofight carefully descended onto a special platform where similar devices were already standing. Thomas, their new companion, respectfully invited Susie to follow him, bowing his head slightly. Inside the residence, Susie found herself in the throne room, where she saw the Grand Empress of Moli, an attractive and powerful woman whose precious jewelry and bold outfit spoke of her greatness. 5 noble women sat at the table, all dressed equally provocatively and looking at her with curiosity. It dawned on Susie that these must be the governors of the regions Lucas had mentioned earlier. To her surprise, Lucas was allowed to remain outside the hall door, which increased her sense of anxiety. Susie had not yet fully realized that she was in another world and had not yet adjusted her perceptions to these realities. "Mistress Susie is present before your Imperial Majesty," Thomas announced. Molly simply nodded in response, and Susie followed the gesture, not knowing the exact greeting rituals in this place. "My name is Empress Molly," the ruler said, studying her with her eyes. "Susie," she corrected, and choosing an empty seat opposite the throne, sat down, feeling the gaze of everyone present on her. "Where did you come to us from?" Molly asked, her voice full of curiosity. "From planet Earth. I heard that sometimes people from other dimensions fly into your world." Susie tried to maintain the initiative in the conversation. "This hasn't happened for a long time. The last time was more than 100 years ago." "Was there magic in your world?" "No. Our world is as technologically advanced as Novera, although I doubt our technology is similar at all," Susie replied, intent on learning more about how this new world to her was run and functioned. Taking a deep breath, Susie was still getting used to the idea of moving to a new world. Empress Molly asked her several questions about the Earth, about traditions, and how she lived in her homeland. When Susie mentioned that she had 2 children, one of whom was a girl, the nobles were surprised by the news. She wondered why this was so important. Susie lied about her marital status. After all, in Novera, judging by the Empress's reaction, the concept of family is different. She introduced herself as the owner of a furniture store, and not just an employee, in order to somehow fit into these new norms. The opinion she expressed about gender equality caused clear misunderstanding among them. Moreover, here power was in the hands of women, and Susie felt this keenly. Empress Molly introduced her to the governors, each of whom welcomed the new arrival. Susie responded responsibly to every greeting, but remembered only one name: Molly. "You will be credited with the starting capital and given an estate, as well as a bracelet that will reflect all your property and your position in our society," the Empress announced. "Tomorrow at 3 o'clock, you have an important event. Don't be late. This is your first choice in the new world," she continued, and Susie felt her heart beat faster. "First choice? What choice are you talking about?" Susie asked, confused. Empress Molly momentarily lifted the corner of her lips in a sly smile. "Tomorrow, you will have to choose your first 3 husbands, Susie," she said, raising her tone. "I'm not going to choose husbands. I need a job, freedom," Susie answered sharply. "Oh dear, you must take care of your future, and here, as soon as a girl reaches adulthood, she makes her first choice. Without this, you are in danger of being exiled to the wildlands, or becoming almost a slave to one of us," the Empress explained. Susie was confused. She was still determined to find her own way in this world. "Thank you, Your Imperial Majesty, for the information," Susie replied, standing up and addressing the ladies gathered in the hall. Outwardly, she remained calm, but internally, she was already making plans. Leaving the throne room, Susie realized that her task the next day was to learn everything about the laws of Novera, about the savage lands, and if possible, find an alternative to tomorrow's choice. And this she intended to do, no matter how difficult it was for her. Deputy Lucas stood by Susie's side as she inspected her new bracelet, a sophisticated device that served as her ID, payment instrument and asset indicator at the same time. 1 million reais was immediately transferred to the account. For Susie, this was an abstract amount until she got a feel for the economy of Novera. Further, still in the same monumental building, they met a man who, using a visor, showed the existing estates. Susie watched them, wondering about the location of each estate in relation to cities or natural conditions. She was inclined to choose the Merrick estate, but Lucas cautiously intervened. "Please hear my opinion about Merrick, madam," Lucas suggested. Susie smiled at him. This sweet note of concern did not leave her indifferent. He told her about the climatic conditions of this region. Although it was not particularly cold here, nighttime temperature changes and the abundance of greenery could create some inconvenience. As a result of the conversation, Susie asked him if he would stay with her, or if he would have to go back to the doctor. "I am ready to follow your instructions, madam," Lucas replied with a humble gesture. "Then what estate would you recommend?" Susie asked quietly. Lucas suggested taking a look at the estates in Ogma, particularly highlighting one further north. He explained that it requires investment, but is ideally located in terms of climate and accessibility. After his words, Susie no longer doubted her choice. Still overwhelmed by the new world, she soon signed a contract and became the owner of the estate. "Now let's register ownership, and then I can offer you Aerofit if you want," suggested a person who was watching their conversation. Susie looked at Lucas, and his negative shake of his head helped her make up her mind. "We won't buy Aerofit yet. First, we need to get used to the new world," she thought, and began to plan what she would do next, suddenly feeling more confident on this unfamiliar soil. Despite all the difficulties and uncertainty, she was beginning to feel at home, ready to face Novera's new challenges. Susie, not yet accustomed to being a lady in this new world, politely thanked the man, explaining that she would decide to postpone the purchase of the Aerofit until she better understood the local currency and its value. She tried to speak confidently, without showing her inner excitement. As soon as they left the building, Susie received a notification on her bracelet that the Aybrook estate was now in her possession. She was surprised how easily the new life accepted Novera's strange laws, but was grateful for the quick response. "Lucas, what's next?" she asked, following the Aerophyte assistant, still unsure of her actions. "Do you want me to remain in your service, madam?" Lucas asked quietly. "Yes, sure. How to organize this?" "You will have to visit the hospital and sign an agreement with Dr. Elias Kern to transfer my services to you. And yes, your future spouses will be responsible for my salary." "Okay. How much was your salary as a doctor?" Susie already felt more determined. 50 reais a month, and the plan was to double it after the trial period, which I actually already went through working with you, Lucas explained frankly. Convinced that this was a small amount compared to her new income, Susie saw no reason to object. Elias met her at the medical center and accepted her documents. He assured that he would always be happy to provide medical assistance if necessary. Susie couldn't help but ask about polyandry in Novera. Fertility problems forced us to take such measures. Girls started showing up less and less, and there were a lot more boys, Elias explained. Lost in thought, Susie considered what she had heard. She began to understand what else the world of Novera with all its laws and customs could surprise her with. Deciding that the first step was to deal with the law and explore the possibility of avoiding polyandry, Susie boldly stepped into a new, unpredictable life in a foreign land, whose stellar bodies reminded her of her distant native Earth. Following Lucas into the newly acquired Aerofit, Susie felt a surge of emotion and hesitation that she quickly tried to hide. They soon left the center of Ogma with a small jump, more like a jump. It seemed that the market for vehicles in Novera was significantly cheaper than the offer at the Empress's residence. And so, having strengthened her position, Susie headed to her new home, the Aybrook estate. Along the way, Lucas shared with Susie the cost of the Aerofit. They discussed various aspects of life in Novera, including the legal system and the possibility of avoiding polyandry. To Susie's surprise, she will have to choose spouses for 3 days in a row, which only strengthens the Empress's too insidious plan. When they landed in Aybrook, Susie was struck by the beauty and monumentality of the estate. It was an exquisite combination of classical architecture with all the conveniences of the modern world. The smells of the garden, the sound of the fountains, everything was so wonderful. The manor's staff turned out to be exclusively male, which surprised Susie, given that women did not usually work here. The dinner was simple but filling, and Susie suddenly felt a sense of loneliness, heightened by Lucas's absence. When she learned that the servants had already eaten separately and that the maintenance of the estate was greatly hampered due to lack of food, Susie decided to act. She ordered Lucas to call the servants so that they could meet and discuss what immediately needed to be acquired for the estate. Taking care of the estate seemed to Susie less of a problem and more of an opportunity. And although she still felt alone in a strange world, in Novera, new horizons and prospects now opened up for her. Susie was prepared for challenges, but was determined to create a new successful life in this unpredictable and surprising world. Using a rented plane, Susie and Lucas easily covered the distance to the center of Ogma, where the assistant managed to purchase her own transport, much cheaper than what she had previously been offered. This filled Susie with a sense of confidence and independence. Their own aerofight floated through the airspaces, revealing to them the panorama of Novera, with its unusual landscapes and cityscapes, resigning themselves to the idea that it was truly in another world. Arriving in Abrook, she saw her new property for the first time, and Susie felt a surge of delight at its beauty and grandeur. The ancient forms of the building were smoothly complemented by modern elements. She understood that there was a lot of work to be done to bring the estate into complete order, but the task seemed surprisingly pleasant to her. Thoughts about her imminent marriage swirled in her head, causing her conflicting feelings and questions about the future family life that awaited her at Novera. How can I share the love between 3 husbands if I find them? Susie mused before gathering her courage and talking to the servants. As they gathered around, Susie introduced herself, told her story, and only momentarily resisted the urge to keep most of her experience to herself. There was a special power in the frankness of her story, an honesty that revealed a strong will to overcome, which charged the room with respect and sympathy. Ferris, the estate manager, contributed by talking about his work and offering his assistance. He was a stately man, which added a seriousness to his manner of communication. And amazed by this, Susie noticed that there was often no smile on his face. She thought about his past and what could happen. The details of the life of the servants, the characteristic features of Ferris and Lucas outlined before Susie, an increasingly multifaceted picture of this world. She was beginning to feel part of Novera, ready to create a new life, not only for herself, but also for those who were now in her care. Lucas, who stood at the helm of the aerofight with a feeling of confidence, drove the transport towards the Palace of the Winds estate, where a new life awaited him and Susie. Having finally chosen the right means of transportation, Susie felt the weight of decisions lifted from her shoulders, and her heart became calmer. The Hall of the Winds estate greeted them with awe of the past and hopes for a future, luxurious and full of dignity. Susie realized that her upcoming marriage was just the beginning of a chapter that promised to be full of discovery and transformation. Susie, immersed in her new responsibilities at the Hall of the Winds estate, was faced with a choice unprecedented for Novera, the choice of a husband. In this happy world, where times and customs are so intertwined, the woman had to choose not 1, but 3 unusual life partners. Tradition requires good qualities: wisdom, valor, and devotion. The first candidate was Luke, the defender of justice. He was impressive in his ability to always be there in the most difficult moments and provide constant support. Under these circumstances, Susie asked him to demonstrate his true courage by showing him evidence of decision-making in deeper places. The second groom turned out to be Thomas, a doctor who impressed Susie not only with his unsurpassed care, but also with his clear mind and ability to foresee the smallest figure of the estate. Ferris, the estate manager, became the third chosen one. In him, Susie valued loyalty and dedication, as well as a relentless pursuit of excellence. Susie set a condition for Ferris: to cancel the dedication, to coordinate a large charity ball to improve the well-being of the surrounding villages. Meanwhile, each of the suitors realized their qualities, passed the tests, and demonstrated their devotion to Susie and the estate. According to Novera tradition, the wedding was accompanied by a grand celebration, where close and new friends, employees, and neighbors were able to witness these events, cementing their unity and the beginning of a new story in the life of Susie and Zal Novera. Winds. As the days passed, the landscape of the estate became a familiar sight from the window, and Susie gradually improved her life. Charming Lucas, always with advice on his tongue, next to her, was ready to support her in the stormy river of a new life. The history of the Halls of the Winds was just beginning, but Susie already fully felt that this place had become her real home, rich not only in marble and grandeur, but also in true friendship and warmth.